Well, David just said that we've known each other for a long time. I think it's been about 25 years. I'm not sure exactly. My name's Woody Zool, and I'm going to share with you the idea of mob programming, and I want to talk about flow. How does this relate to quality? And that is actually one of the big things that we notice when we first start working this way. And that is that, I should check with you. Is everything working okay here? Who's running
Yeah,
things, I just want to
all looks
verify.
good. Screen share looks good.
All righty, thank you. Um, so, well, I'll get to that part later, but this has working well together improves a lot of things. So this is part of what I'm trying to share today. So let's see where we can go with this. Get up here where I can click on my slides. I got a lot to cover, but I think I should be able to get through it without rushing too much. I start almost every talk I ever give, making sure I remind myself and make it clear to you that I can't tell you what to do or whether or not you should do something. What I'm here to do is to share what we did and to share why we did it. And I hope that that gives you some hope that you can make improvements in your own environment. So that's essentially what this slide's about. I'm going to give a really quick introduction to mob programming. Mob programming is where 5, 6, 7, even more people sit at a single computer and work together on creating software. And this can be thought of like pair programming, but with just a lot more people. It was always interesting to me to work on teams, I'm putting that in quotes, where we actually didn't do anything at all like a team. I never really quite understood why we call ourselves a team, like a database team or a front end team or whatever. And yet we never really did anything as a team. So let's see where this takes us today. Mob programming is all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. Now, that's to me what Agile is. They recognize that if we're going to collaborate, or maybe let me say that slightly differently, prior to something like Agile coming along, a lot of software was done with individuals doing their work in different phases. And those phases made it hard for us to work on the same thing at the same time. We clearly can't be collaborating if we're not working on the same thing. But we can be collaborating if we're working on the same thing at different times, but working at the same time enhances our ability or our capability to collaborate. And if we're in the same space, nowadays that can be virtual, of course, working remotely, or it can be in the same building in front of the same computer. This is what mob programming adds to it. We're going to be at the same computer. Now, a lot of people ask me about this. Does it mean there's just one computer? And I'd like to say not necessarily, but all the work we're doing is going through a single computer, and we're looking at some large monitors. I'll explain a little bit about it. This talk is more about what I see as a very important concept as to why this works, and that has to do with flow. We'll cover all that. Essentially, it's gathering together all the brilliant minds at the same time with the skills and knowledge needed to accomplish this work. We have different points of view, different perspectives, so to speak. We have different capabilities. We're at different levels in our careers. We're at different specialties that we have, but it kind of looks like this. In this picture, there's a tester. Matter of fact, I'll kind of zero in here. There's a tester, a product owner who happened to also be a developer, but from a different team because we were writing some software for their team. I was the manager of the team, but also a developer, another developer, a database expert, another developer, and another developer. These developers have a wide range of skills, but we have everybody we need so that we don't need to go off the team to get an answer to a question that's blocking us. It's not 5 people watching one person coding, but to make this work, we have to have some kind of protocol, basically to act as a single brain, even though we have 5 or 6 or 7 brains working together. We use a guideline that we learned a long time ago. Each of the navigators is there to contribute to the ideas that we're going to try. And the person on the keyboard we call the driver, they're going to actually code that in or key it in. It doesn't matter whether they can write code or not, because someone on the navigation team will be able to guide them if they need help with that part. Not everybody's forced to take the keyboard. That's a rule that we followed, so to speak. We really didn't have any rules. This is really the closest thing to a rule that we had. For an idea to go from someone's brain into the computer, it has to go through someone else's hands. Now, I learned to program in the early 80s. And in those days, You could buy a little computer, and a little computer came with a keyboard attached to it. And that's how I learned to program. The system is set up so one person is coding. I'm not sure that was the best way to do things, but somewhere about 15 years into it, I was introduced to pair programming. And mob programming is just pair programming, but with a few more people. It seems crazy. I'm going to quickly show you some pictures just to show that there are people doing this all over the place. Here is the original place where we originated the idea in San Marcos, California. They grew to have 6, 7, 8 teams. Right now, they're all working remotely, and I believe they're going to continue working remotely. Matter of fact, I think they're hiring right now. Only people are in the Pacific time zone, but if you're interested, get in touch with me. I'll get you connect with them. I no longer work there, but that's where we originated the idea. Here's folks from all over the world. I like to point out that people sometimes ask me, how does everybody stay engaged? How do you keep them interested? Well, I've never had a problem with that. It seems like we're moving fast. Everybody's there to contribute. They stay engaged. It's not exhausting if you do it right, if there is a right, but it's not that exhausting. It's really, it can be stress-free and relaxing, actually. But let's go on here. Here's some more groups in Stockholm, London, a couple teams at a place in San Diego. Some folks in South Africa. I love this picture up here from 1960. That's Admiral Grace Hopper. She was an important computer pioneer. I don't think they're really doing mob programming, but the picture looked to me like they were. The only advice I'd give them is get some large monitors, because that computer doesn't even look like it has any monitor. They had to read things off of fanfold paper. Some of you might remember those days. This is a group in Sweden, at the public television in Sweden, and I love this group. They took and shared these pictures in an article they wrote. They really have a fantastic arrangement, although I'm pretty sure they're all working remotely right now. But I like this idea. There's every team member of all the skills are there in this work area, and they work together all day long, every day. Well, it can be done remotely, so there's a picture of a team working remotely. They started doing this way before the work from home of the past year and a half. But yeah, it can be done remotely. And of course, this is not programming, but this is NASA mission control. And I like to think of it this way. This is the same concept. All the brilliant minds working together at the same time on the same thing. And most of them in the same place or same space, although some of them are in outer space. But I'd like to cover one or two more things. Why would we work this way? I usually do this as an exercise. And whoever's in my workshops, they can come up with all the ideas of why would we work this way with 5 people at one computer. Lots of knowledge sharing, continuous code and design review, a lot of perspectives and different viewpoints on the work, rapid feedback. We're getting really quick feedback, allows us to deploy things daily, multiple times a day. We're focusing on the right things, and it enhances the flow of the work and eliminates queue and reduces inventory. I will talk about queues and inventory in a little bit. We were ending up with better solutions of much higher quality, and it was more fun, less stressful, more engaging. These are some of the benefits. But there's another way to answer this question. Why would we work this way? Because the team decided to work this way. It was a decision they can make for themselves, so it was up to them to decide how they wanted to work. I don't think we'd have ever been able to do mob programming if we didn't have that arrangement, where it was up to the team to figure out the model of work they wanted to follow. And it was kind of an accident. That's for another talk. We stumbled upon this idea of working all together because we were practicing code techniques and about clean code and making improvements. We were studying and practicing those things together. And we were building a good team of people who were willing to work with each other and were good at working with each other. Collaborating well is necessary if we're going to work this way. So that was a really rapid introduction. But every time I give an introduction, going back to 2012, when I first talked about this, less than a year after we had started doing it, I gave a talk at a conference, and the first question I think that I got was this: how can you be productive with 5 people at one computer? And at that time, I just said, I don't know, but does that really matter? I don't know how this works. All I know is that it does work. We were paying a lot of attention, and this is what we noticed. When we worked separately, imagine we're working in separate cubicles or maybe in separate rooms, and we added up our daily work together, we would get a certain amount done. Now, this is actually 2 days of work as it would have been done the year before we started working this way. Once we started working this way, we were getting a lot more done. Now, I can't give you exact numbers, and this isn't proof that this is better. But for us, we could see a lot more was getting done. But it wasn't just a lot more stuff. It was important stuff. It was the more meaningful stuff. It was better done. The customers, which were mostly internal but external as well, seemed to like what we were providing for them quite a bit better than before. It was also of much higher quality, of the kind of quality we would think of the illodies that sometimes we have. But that goes for both of these. We were almost bug free for the 3.5 years that I worked at Hunter Industries, where we originated this. 3.5 years I worked there after we started working with the mob programming. We only had 3 bugs get reported into our bug tracking system. I was just talking with them yesterday there, just by chance, and we asked about that, and they said they no longer maintain any kind of a database of bugs. As soon as a bug is reported, they simply fix it, and on average, they go a month or 2 or longer, 3 months, without getting any bug from any of the projects that they are developing. So it was much higher quality, and you can imagine some of the reasons why, but a lot of it just had to do with having all the brains together to do the work. Nothing slipped through. We had a very tightly woven, well-working safety net, so to speak. Let's go on here. At first we thought, well, this is definitely have to do something with systems. The thing with systems is, I like this saying, it's not about the sum of the behavior of the parts. It's about the product of their interactions. And the way that Russell Acuff used to talk about systems, he would say, like in an automobile, if you've got a fuel injector, an engine, some brakes, a transmission, so on, those things are useless separate. You have to bring them together, and the quality of the car, how useful the car is, it's going to depend on how well do these things integrate. How well do they work together? And that's one way of looking at a system, and I think that helps us get a quick focus on this. But we knew it wasn't just that we were a system, and that we were really taking advantage of these interactions. And so we started looking into this. At first, I didn't like the question. How can we be productive with 5 people at one computer? I didn't like that word productive. Now, this is my father. This picture is of him about 20 years before I met him, because he was 25 years old when I was born. He would say something like this: a good question isn't for answers. It's for finding a better question. And he would often add, when you find the right question, it will answer itself. You'll know you arrived. So I'm going to go through the process that we used in following my father's basic technique of asking questions till you land on the right question. And to take it a step further here, just so you know, he was an engineer. He worked at the phone company in the US here, Pacific Bell, and he was well known for his problem-solving skills. And he helped design switching stations and things like that. So I wanted a better question. And the first step is to just look at the question that was first given to you. And I didn't like that word productive. So let's talk about that. I'm going to share 3 different concepts that are related to productivity: efficiency, productivity, and effectiveness. In a condensed form, efficiency is usually about utilization. Is everybody working as hard as they can? Is our equipment running as fast as it can? And whatever it is, if you're on a factory floor, do we have enough inventory to feed the machines? Things like that. That's just about utilization. Productivity is about actually finishing work, completing something. And effectiveness is about working on the right things and getting those done. When we're effective, we're probably efficient and we're productive, but we add this extra idea. So I'm not interested in productivity. I'm not interested in efficiency. Efficiency can be measured with busy work. Productivity can be measured, even though we're getting the wrong things done. We got 32 things done today. If the wrong things, who cares? But effectiveness is about getting the right things done. So that's why I'm after that. I wanted to change this. Let's just say, how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer instead of productive? Now, that's not the better question. This is the beginning step to getting to a better question. The next thing is, we need to flip this over. This is about the point of view. You have to understand the point of view of the person asking the question. Now remember, people asking me this question at the end of a talk, they would ask me, well, how can you be productive? And it was usually managers who would ask that question. So I started gathering information from them. And I would ask them, well, what do you think works well? And they would usually say, yeah, I know that working separately, put everybody, they're working on things in parallel. We're getting a lot more done. But I really question this. Matter of fact, sometimes they'll ask me, are there any studies that prove that working as a team is better than working solo and having everybody separated? And I just reverse that question. Is there any studies that prove that everybody working separately is better than working as a team? And they don't have those studies. It would be the same study that they're asking for. They've made a decision that this is better, even though they have no proof that it's better. They just know that it kind of works. It just doesn't work all that well. They often express it this way. Well, I want to get 5 things done, not just one thing. Well, I think they're saying I want to get 5 things worked on, because who knows when they're going to get done. This isn't really what happens. They're scrambling quite a bit more, and we're going to see this in a minute. They'll also say it this way. I don't want to pay 5 people to do the work of one person. And again, that's like a misunderstanding of what mob programming is about. All the work that we're doing, even when we divide the team up, could be potentially done with one person if that one person had all the knowledge and skills and capabilities themselves. So it's that they want to get the work done faster. And I think that we trick ourselves into thinking faster gets done when we have everybody working separately on things. It seems obvious that it should be faster, but I'm not sure it really is. So we flip this over. So this is part of my dad's process. He said, once you understand their point of view, you have to ask the question from your point of view or from the opposite point of view. Now, he would probably, if he was still alive, remind me there are many other points of view. But right now, we're just looking at the 2. This is the beginnings of thinking through these things. And I would ask the question this way. How can we be effective if we separate the people who should be working together? And when we separate them, it usually is into separate cubicles, sometimes into separate rooms, sometimes into separate buildings or on different floors. Often it's even on different teams or different departments. Like the database person's works under a boss who leads the database people, or maybe the systems people, or something like that. The testers work for a boss who is in charge of the testers. They're in a different department. The people who do the deployments, they're in a different group as well. These things are not just separate by space. We're separate by who's our boss. We're separate by how we can communicate with each other. I've been to places where it could take a day or 2 just to get an appointment, because I would have to go to my boss to go to someone else's boss to ask them for time for me to have a meeting with them. Well, this led to a better question. It was in 2 steps, and I really should change my slides to add this in. But this is what happens. When you ask these questions, you start getting a better idea of what question do we really need to ask. And I think that it comes down to this. We need to know, is there a way to compare these things that's reasonable? Now, if you say, well, would compare them by seeing which team gets the most work done? Well, if you have a team that's really proficient at working a solo and another team that's really proficient at working as a team, you might be able to measure some things, but are they working on the same thing? Are they working on the same project, the same aspects and the same artifacts of the same project? Those kind of tests are really expensive to put together, and I'm not sure anybody can really afford to do that kind of testing. But I think there are other ways. And the better question, how do we compare the 2 that I like to use is, let's start by asking ourselves, what are the things that destroy effectiveness? Now, I usually do this as an exercise, but since we're not going to do that here, I do have a photo I took of a team that I worked with 6 or 7 years ago. It was just before the workshop. We came in, and one of the first exercises we did was gathered up. And this is a team that was not yet doing mob programming. I'm not sure they even understood what mob programming was at that time. So what are the things that are making it difficult for you to get your work done? What are the things that destroy the effectiveness for you? And they came up with 50 things in just 3 minutes. The one I'm going to point out first here, I'm going to only show a few, but one is needless meetings. Now, I would change that myself to just meetings, because I think almost all the time, meetings are a symptom of a bigger problem. They're not so much a problem themselves. It's that we have to have the meetings, that we have a problem. And that really is that we don't have a better way to make decisions, keep each other informed, share ideas, things like that. I think there are better ways to do it. But look at some of these other things. There's a grouping here. I should put them all together. Context switching, distractions, multitasking, waiting on a dependency, interacting with others. All these things kind of go together. When we're distracted from our work, a lot of people say, well, when I'm in the zone and somebody comes and interrupts me, it takes me a long time to get back to where I was. And these are some things developers often see are a big problem for them. But look at these other things. Analysis paralysis means we're discussing things more than taking action. We're waiting for someone else to give us an approval. So here's others, waiting on other teams. Unrealistic expectations, unclear expectations. Oh my goodness. I got a story I could share. I won't, but something that I actually worked with Dave McCartan on many years ago, where the requirements were never completed. So they never gave us the requirements. They kept telling us they would have them. They just let us work on whatever we thought we should be until they finally canceled the project. They had funded it, never got it done. We were waiting for expectations. They didn't yet exist. They didn't exist. The requirements didn't really exist. They didn't know what they wanted. Lack of skills, missing requirements, insufficient resources, cumbersome processes, technical debt. Now, if we have these problems in our way of working, we can look at our way of working and decide, does this way of working have more problems than that way of working? And this is what we noticed. When we worked as a team, many of these problems, and I really call them mostly symptoms, just faded away. We were addressing the real problems, even though we didn't set out to address any of these symptoms or the problems that underlie them. This is an interesting thing to me. What was happening is when we worked as a team, we weren't getting the interference, the distractions, the context switching, because we were all staying in the same context. I'm going to talk about one kind of communication problem. I stumbled upon this, I'm sure a lot of people also had, somewhere around 2003, long time ago. I was in a company and we were trying to figure out why we were having so many communication problems. And so we put a little team together and we were researching and finding out what kind of communication problems can we have and what was our biggest problem. And this is the problem that I saw as being the biggest one. And I named it this myself, the question queue time. There might be some other name for it. That's the amount of time that we must wait to get an answer to a question that's blocking us. That means we're working on something and we can't continue till we get an answer to this question. They're telling me that we need to move from Facebook to YouTube if you're in Facebook. It's best wherever you're at to move to YouTube right now. There you go. And if you go to YouTube, why, then you'll get this same presentation, but you'll be in a place where it probably won't get cut off. All righty. So let's take this on just a little bit further. Some people tell me they tried to, but it won't go. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. If somebody from the support team wants to break in and help guide us, I'll stop for that whenever you can. Okay, so this thing is really critical, the blocking questions. And I'll give you an example of one. We were working on something once where there were two drop downs on a screen that we needed to create so they could select some stuff. And all the instructions for the first drop down were the same instructions for the second drop down. This is problematic. The reason that this happened was somebody probably copied and pasted. So that is a problem. We didn't know what the second drop down was for, so we had to contact the person who wrote the requirement. We contacted them. We didn't get a chance to have them come and help us for several days. So that is waiting to get an answer. So typically, this waiting is a waste. As a matter of fact, in the lean sense of the word, all waiting is waste. You can't eliminate it all, but we want to eliminate as much as we can. If we use a value stream map, we can draw a chart that shows us how much time we're spending effectively working and how much time we're spending wasting time. And this basically just shows this line at the top is we're working, getting things done, then we're blocked because of a question, then we're working again, then we're blocked. You can see if we compressed out the block time, we could get twice as much done this day. So if we make this hypothetical situation where for every hour we work, what if we got one question just to give us a way to compare the queue time and how it affects our day? So if we have zero queue time, it doesn't matter how many questions if we can answer them as soon as we get them. However, what if we have a 2-minute queue time? What if it's 10 minutes? These both seem minor, but they're interruptions. They cause context switching. They cause us to interrupt other people. But what if it takes an hour? What if it takes a day? Now, when I'm doing this workshop or the workshops I do internally, I often ask them, I want a poll. How long do you need to wait to get a question that's blocking you? On average, give me a range. And they'll usually say it's something like between a couple hours and a couple days. Well, that's a huge amount of waste. You can see, even if you're wasting an hour to get that answer, we're wasting half our time if we're only getting 4 questions a day. And a weird thing happens. As soon as the answer comes and we can start working on our thing again, it'll reveal the next problem that we don't have an answer for. And we need to go back to find somebody who can answer that question. So how do we typically solve for this? Well, you all know we've got this one task we're working on, and then we introduce a second task. This is called inventory. We've introduced inventory so we can stay busy. Our problem isn't being busy. And inventory itself, my definition of it here is it's work started on but not yet delivering value. Interestingly, inventory itself is waste. Most software projects are full of this kind of work. Not very good. However, it makes us feel like we've made an improvement because now we're staying busy. But what we've done is we've we've solved for a symptom and not for the problem. The symptom is we're not busy because we're waiting, so work on something else. But the problem is we're not getting answers in a timely manner. Solving for a symptom doesn't actually solve any problems. It introduces other problems. And inventory itself is a problem. That introduces all kinds of difficulties, and I will cover that some other day if you want to talk about it. So how did we solve this? We didn't really. It just faded away. It's a problem that we stopped having as soon as we started working as a group, as long as the people we were working with and the questions we had could be answered by them. But as soon as we had to go off our team to get an answer, then we were blocked again. But this really emphasized it for us, and it made us realize we were talking about flow. And some of the product owners, it was actually the product owners, the database people, the deployment people, and the systems people, and then the testers. They were all on different teams than us. And that's where our biggest queues were, or the biggest waiting time. As soon as some of the people on these other teams saw how much this impacted us, we started reducing that queue time. And eventually, all of those people are part of our teams. We no longer have them in different departments. So this is the terminology we would use. When we work together, we were getting this automatic one-piece flow. I'll explain flow in just a few minutes. This is the idea of lean flow, that work flows without interruption. Okay, so this became a very important word. Matter of fact, you can see I've made it so big it fills the whole screen. And that's just to say, hey, I think this is super important. Let's pay attention to it in our work. Now, once we started trying to study flow so we could better explain these concepts to the other people in the company that we were working with, we realized there are many kinds of flow. And the two I'm going to focus on right now, we use the word flow in software development for at least 5 or 6 different things. And the two I want to cover today are psychological flow and lean flow. Psychological flow came along, I think quite a while ago. It could have been in the 70s, 80s. This fellow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi from Hungary, the reason I can't pronounce his name is because I'm not real familiar with how to say that combination of letters. Luckily, I don't think he's here today. I don't want to offend him. So here's the thing. He defined flow as being the state that you can get into that's highly effective when you're really absorbed or really focused on something. This is powerful. And we often think of it as being in the zone in software development. You get this sense of ecstasy and clarity. Now, sometimes it can be very frustrated, but without the distractions of others and other things going on, the sense of time disappears. We start getting this ability to know right where we want to go. It may be just an experiment to get us to the end of where we want to go, but this is the basic idea. Being in the zone is a powerful thing, and we started getting a little bit worried when we worked as a team. Maybe we're destroying this kind of psychological flow. We talked about it on the team, and we decided that we aren't, because we never forced anybody to work with the team. It was up to them. If they wanted to go work alone, they could go work alone. If they saw a problem they wanted to think about alone, they could go think about it, experiment, do whatever they wanted. If they like to go take a walk, because that's where they do their best thinking. That's how it is for me. I'd go out and walk around the building, walk around the campus where all our buildings were, till my ideas got clear. So we didn't feel we were destroying the psychological flow. However, each person's different, and we realize we need to allow each person to find their own way to stay in the flow they want to be in. And this is part of what we think we were doing. However, I wanted a better question than, are we destroying this kind of flow? And this is the question we came up with. Is there a sort of team psychological flow? And what would that be like? Well, it turns out there is, but at first we couldn't find any research on this. So we started doing our own research. We just collected photographs of people in teams. I just went on, online and just searched for teams and grabbed every photo I could. And we could talk about the different aspects of working as a team, like as a musical group. Some of you might know who these kids are. That's Dave Clark 5, right? Anyways, just kidding you. Here's Xerox Park, a whole different kind of team. Each one of these. This is my favorite because it's just all the skills needed to do this operation. This was a famous operation from 1942, a heart operation on a 12-year-old kid. There's 3 surgeons here. There's 5 or 6 technicians. There's a supervising surgeon. These people are all focused on one thing, and they're all bringing their skills together. We were looking for examples of how people might work as a team. We read a lot of books, we read a lot of articles, and we discussed it quite a bit. And then we started finding some actual research. And this was available at that time. It just took us a while to find it. Research can be hard to find sometimes. When you have collective ambition, common goals, and they're aligned with your personal goals, and you have all the skills you need and you integrate them well, coupled with open communication and the safety of being able to communicate with each other, where we can share our ideas without fear, we start getting some benefits out of this. This mutual commitment, sense of unity, sense of joint progress. We end up building this mutual trust, and we have this holistic focus that allows us to get bigger things done than any one of us could do individually, because we're doing them with this mastermind of 5 or 6 or more brains. We did this actually once with 14 people on something that was so big and important to the company to get done as quickly as possible that we had to gather 14 people to get all the knowledge into one space and work on this thing till it was done. So we were enabling team flow just by having practiced working well together. We didn't realize this thing like team flow could exist, but we've been practicing collaboration skills for about 6 months before we started mob programming. And we wrote a lot of what I'm sharing with you here today sometime in late 2012 or 2013, because we started working this way in 2011. But after studying these ideas of flow, this really helped us get an idea of why this is working well for us. But there's still this other kind of flow I want to cover, which is flow as in lean manufacturing. So in the lean manufacturing world, this is a very simplified description. Now, I have worked at places where we used lean manufacturing processes, so I'm sort of familiar with this. As a matter of fact, I really enjoy the concept. The idea of flow in manufacturing is we're going to work on something from start to finish until it's done, without the interruptions, without the waiting, without the excess inventory. We really want to eliminate all inventory. We want to eliminate all waiting, but we can't do that completely. Okay? Yeah. So, can we get this with software development? Well, I don't think I'd be here today unless I felt that we could, with this particular talk anyways. And this book does a really good job of explaining how flow works for product development. And product development, software development, is a type of product development. And I'm only going to cover one little part of it. And that little part of it is the queuing. But this book is well worth getting. At least somebody in your organization should be familiar with these things. The principle of queuing waste really is in alignment. It is in alignment with what I realized with the the question queue time. Queues are the root cause of the majority of economic waste in software development. Now, if that is true, we better do something about it. Now, I kind of believe it is true. And as a matter of fact, I think it is everywhere I visit, I see these same kinds of things. I'm going to finish with one little bit, and then we're going to come to a conclusion. Queues create longer cycle time. All the rest of these things, I think, are related to that longer cycle time. Cycle time is essentially how long does it take to go from start to finish on something? And if our cycle time is being increased because we're waiting and we're queuing for stuff, then yeah, we're going to have a lot of other problems. So I can define flow with software development this way. This is the definition I came up with. Each story or each thing we're going to work on flows from idea or concept to delivered working software that people are using as directly as possible, without the queuing and waiting, without the inventory, without the distractions, the interruptions, the context switching, the multitasking. When we eliminate those things, we are truly achieving flow. And this is the way I kind of think of it, although this makes it look linear because it shows things going from one to the other. It's not really that linear. But I'll warn you, if somebody's giving a talk about agile stuff and they don't put a circle into their talk, it's not really agile. So I put this in here so you know this talk is really about agile stuff, right? So here's the thing. At any point in this, we are learning stuff. The feedback is happening at every step. And I want as many of these steps as possible. Let's try and deliver 2, 3, 4, 10 different things a day from each team if we can. Let's figure out how to do that. And I think mob programming has achieved that for us. Matter of fact, when we achieved flow, we found we were working almost always on the right things, getting the work done. This includes exploring and experimenting discovery and working on a great deal less of the wrong things. They faded away for us. We won't go into details of this because I want to be done, because I want to save time, hopefully, for at least one question. Here's the end result for us, though. We were achieving this lean flow. We were eliminating the queues and the inventory. And this lean flow, coupled with the psychological flows, really were taking us to the result we were getting, but we didn't set out to do that. It just is the end result of what happened. We're optimizing for the flow of the work rather than for the output of the individual. We are not trying to get the most work out of each person. We're trying to get the best of each of us into everything we do. To me, this is massively powerful. So I can believe that I can answer that original question. How can we be effective with 5 people at one computer? It's because of these flows. Remember, originally I thought it was flow versus flow, when we realized maybe we're ruining the psychological flow. But we're getting it. As a matter of fact, we're getting 3 flows: the psychological flow, plus the team psychological flow, plus the lean flow. This was a miracle to us. Now, this isn't a golden or silver bullet, as they would say. This is not the answer to all of our problems, but some bright programmer in one of my talks shouted out, that is flow plus plus. And that's good enough for me. We're getting flow plus plus. So that's the end of the talk. Thank you so very much. I appreciate having this opportunity to share this with you. This ties in very closely to everything I was trying to do over 20 years of working for others, trying to get teamwork back into software development.